The first mistake people make is assuming life owes them anything. That if they just try hard enough, if they're nice enough, if they wait patiently, fairness will eventually reward them. But fairness is not part of the deal. The world is not a referee with a whistle, stepping in to keep things even. It is a stage where people play for advantage, often at your expense, and if you don't see that, you'll spend your life confused about why effort isn't matching results. Look around. The most talented person you know is probably not the one in charge. The hardest worker you know is not the one getting recognition. People who are neither the smartest nor the most capable often end up with the influence. That's not an accident. They're playing a different game. They've accepted the rules as they actually are, while you're stuck believing in rules that never existed. Think about it. You were probably told to keep your head down, do your work, respect others, and eventually things would come back around. That's the narrative drilled into most people. But while you were told to wait your turn, others were being taught something else entirely. How to manipulate perception, how to command attention, how to push when you hesitate. You thought fairness was real. They knew leverage was what mattered. And that difference alone determines who gets ignored and who gets listened to. The Florentine thinker Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, long before social media and modern politics. He watched power change hands in Italy, and he didn't waste time pretending it was about virtue or honesty. He saw the blunt truth power moves toward those who take it, not those who deserve it. He didn't write about fairness, he wrote about survival. His work is often painted as dark or cynical, but the truth is it's simply accurate. He described the world as it functions, not as we wish it did. And if you strip away the illusions you've been handed, you'll see the same patterns everywhere today. I'll tell you something from my own experience. For years, I thought being knowledgeable and hardworking would be enough. I thought people would notice that I was dedicated, prepared, sharp. But no one cared. I watched others with half the skill rise above me simply because they knew how to project certainty. They weren't smarter. They weren't better. They were louder, more confident, and more deliberate in how they presented themselves. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was being taught a brutal lesson: the world doesn't reward ability in silence. It rewards the appearance of authority, and it punishes those who sit quietly waiting to be recognized. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. You start to notice how people maneuver. The one who interrupts isn't necessarily smarter, but they take the floor and suddenly others defer to them. The one who doesn't over-explain, who can stay quiet and let others guess at their thoughts, seems more mysterious and gains more weight. The one who sets boundaries sharply, without apology, gets more respect than the one who bends over backward to be liked. It's not about fairness, it's about presence. And presence doesn't come from being the nicest person in the room. It comes from clarity. It comes from refusing to let others control your psychology. That's why I want you to write it down right now, before you hear another word. I refuse to let others control my psychology. It might sound simple, but it's not. Most people live as if they're puppets. Someone insults them, they flare up. Someone ignores them, they sulk. Someone praises them, they inflate. Their entire emotional state is outsourced to others. That's the easiest way to be controlled. If you can be triggered, you can be manipulated. Now, let's talk about what really shifts the balance. The first principle is that fairness is a trap. Every time you expect people to treat you fairly, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Worse, you're signaling weakness. Because the person who waits for fairness has already surrendered power. They've placed the outcome in someone else's hands. Think about the times you've bitten your tongue, hoping someone would eventually acknowledge your effort. Think about the times you waited for someone to do the right thing instead of demanding it. Did it ever work? Or did you end up resentful, watching the unfairness repeat? Machiavelli understood this dynamic well. He noted that small acts of weakness invite retaliation, while decisive strength prevents it. That doesn't mean cruelty for its own sake. It means refusing to be half-hearted. Either you disengage completely or you assert yourself in a way that ends the matter. Partial resistance just makes you a target. The second principle is that ruthlessness is not about anger. Too many people confuse losing control with being strong. They think shouting, exploding, or forcing others to hear them is power. It's not. That's weakness disguised as strength. True ruthlessness is cold. It's the ability to keep your composure when someone else is trying to knock you off balance. Anyone can yell. It takes control to sit quietly, calculate, and then respond once in a way that changes the entire dynamic. Emotional discipline is the sharpest weapon, because when you don't flinch, the other person has to adjust to you. When you don't take the bait, they have nowhere to go. That's what makes people cautious. Respect is the next thing you need to understand. You can spend your life chasing likability, bending over backward to make people comfortable. And what will you get in return? Temporary approval, but approval fades. Respect lasts. The truth is people use those they like, but tread carefully around those they respect. If you're only aiming to be liked, you'll always be at risk of being taken for granted. But when people know your approval has value and your disapproval carries a cost, they act differently. It doesn't mean cruelty. It means becoming someone others think twice about crossing. The fourth principle is decisive action. This one is simple. Warnings are worthless if they're never backed up. How many times have you seen someone say, "Next time I won't tolerate this," and then tolerate it again? Every time they do, their words lose weight. Authority isn't in what you say, it's in what you enforce. When you take action, it must be decisive, final, and unmistakable. You don't need to act often. But the few times you do, it should be enough to leave no doubt. That single act will echo longer than 100 empty threats. Perception is another layer most people ignore. They think reality is enough. They think being good at their job, or being right in a debate, or being consistent will eventually shine through. But reality isn't what others see. Perception is. And perception is shaped by tone, posture, and presentation. Two people can say the same thing, and one will be brushed aside while the other will be listened to. Why? Because of how they project themselves. If you don't control your image, someone else will define it for you. And once they do, you'll spend the rest of your time trying to escape their version of you instead of defining your own. Narrative control follows naturally. Every action can be framed in multiple ways. You make a bold move, it can be called leadership or arrogance. You protect yourself, it can be seen as selfishness or strength. The event itself is neutral. The story attached to it is what gives it meaning. If you don't create that story, someone else will, and the version others tell might not benefit you. That's why you need to frame events immediately, clearly, and confidently. People believe the first version of the story they hear. If it's yours, you've already set the stage. What makes this all powerful is that it isn't about being louder, nastier, or more aggressive. It's about clarity and control. It's about shifting from being someone who reacts to being someone who acts deliberately. And it's about remembering that the world bends, not to the fair, but to those who understand the rules beneath the surface. Systems are what separate amateurs from people who command respect without effort. Most people rely on threats or negotiations to enforce boundaries. They argue, they plead, they repeat themselves. But the strong don't do that. They create systems where the consequences are automatic. Respect is rewarded, disrespect is cut off. No second warnings, no debates. Once the system is clear, people adapt to it quickly. It's not about constant confrontation, it's about designing a structure that speaks for itself. When people know crossing a line leads to the same outcome every time, they stop testing it. Authority then stops being something you have to prove and starts being something others simply accept. But the most underrated source of power is silence. We live in a world where everyone is shouting, where every opinion is broadcast, where people think volume equals strength. The loudest one in the room seems like they're winning. But look closer. The truly powerful aren't constantly performing. They're watching, calculating, deciding when to move. Silence unnerves people because it forces them to wonder what you're thinking. It puts the burden on them to fill the space, and in doing so, they often reveal more than they should. Machiavelli described rulers as needing to be both fox and lion, cunning enough to avoid traps, strong enough to frighten threats. But even that combination means nothing if you broadcast it all the time. Power that is seen but not heard in advance carries far more weight. What's interesting is how quickly things shift once you start applying these principles. You'll notice conversations play out differently. People who used to dismiss you pause before speaking over you. Those who tested your patience realize they no longer get the reaction they want. And the ones who underestimated you suddenly start adjusting their tone. It doesn't take years to see results. The shift happens almost immediately because people are wired to respond to strength, whether they admit it or not. Of course, not everyone will like it. Some will call you arrogant, cold, or difficult. That's fine. Their reaction only proves you're no longer playing by their script. Remember, being liked makes you replaceable. Being respected makes you necessary. If everyone approves of you, it means you've never set a standard high enough to create friction. And if you've never created friction, you've never truly taken a stand for yourself. Think about the last time you saw someone you respect. What was it about them? It probably wasn't that they were endlessly agreeable. It was that they stood firm, that they didn't bend to pressure, that they had a presence that forced others to recognize their value. You don't respect people because they smile and nod at everything. You respect them because they set limits, they act with confidence, and they refuse to let others steer their emotions. The challenge is that adopting this mindset requires letting go of illusions. You have to give up the idea that effort alone will save you. You have to stop expecting fairness to come from people who are too busy chasing their own advantage. You have to abandon the hope that likability will shield you. It won't. These illusions are comforting, but they're also the very reason so many intelligent, hard-working people remain invisible. Once you tear them down, you're left with a simpler, harsher truth, but also a much more powerful one. You are either shaping the dynamic or being shaped by it. There is no neutral ground. And here's the part that most people miss. None of this requires cruelty. You don't need to go around crushing everyone you meet. You don't need to manipulate for the sake of manipulation. The point isn't to turn yourself into some caricature of ruthlessness. The point is to become someone who can't be exploited, someone who commands respect naturally, someone who knows how to move through a world that has no interest in being fair. That balance, the ability to be both controlled and decisive, is where real strength comes from. When you internalize this, you stop wasting energy on pointless battles. You don't argue every insult. You don't chase every approval. You don't explain yourself endlessly. Instead, you calculate. You decide which moves matter and which don't. You realize that silence is sometimes the most devastating answer, and that one decisive act carries more influence than 1,000 speeches. Suddenly, you're no longer reacting to every little push. You're steering the game. Here's the real choice in front of you. You can keep living as if fairness exists, waiting for others to recognize your worth, hoping effort is enough. If you choose that, don't be surprised when you're overlooked again and again. Or you can strip away the illusion and learn the rules as they are. You can accept that power flows toward clarity, discipline, and control of perception. And once you do, you stop being a pawn in someone else's plan. You become the one writing the plan. This is not theory. Someone, right now, is already using these principles on you. They may not have read Machiavelli. They may not even realize it consciously, but they know how to press your buttons, how to frame the narrative against you, how to get away with things because they know you'll hesitate. If you don't wake up to it, you'll stay trapped. But the moment you do, everything shifts. Because you stop giving away control for free. Most people will never take this path. They'd rather cling to comforting lies than face harsh truths. They'd rather stay liked than risk respect. They'd rather hope for fairness than build systems that enforce it. That's why most people remain ordinary. But if you're still listening, it means something in you already knows this is true. It means you're ready to step out of the illusions you were given and into the reality that actually determines who wins and who gets forgotten. So here's where you start. Stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop expecting. Replace them with clarity, silence, and decisive action. Protect your psychology as if it were a fortress. Because once you let someone else control your state of mind, you've already lost. But if you control it, if you stay cold when others want you hot, if you set standards instead of chasing approval, you'll notice how quickly the balance changes. People don't respect noise. They respect control. If you take nothing else from this, remember, the world bends, not for the fair, not for the hard-working, not for the likable, but for the ones who understand the rules beneath the surface. Either you master them, or you remain mastered. The choice is yours, and if you're serious about no longer being a pawn, show it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe so you don't forget the lessons. But most importantly, start practicing them today, because theory doesn't protect you. Action does. And every day you delay, someone else is using these very principles to gain an advantage over you. You've already wasted enough time waiting for fairness. It's not coming. What you do next will determine whether you stay where you are or finally step into the position you were always capable of. The question isn't whether you can. It's whether you're willing.